Councillor Simpkins is not with us today, and the Mayor can't with us either. I'm therefore going to pass over to Sonia, our clerk, and she will seek nominations for appointments for today's chair. Sonia.
Thank you all. So as Councillor Slay has just mentioned, Councillor Simpkins is unable to attend today's meeting, so please can I take nominations for chair of this meeting?
Nominate Councillor Slay.
You don't need to go through.
No.
Thank you. I'll do my best. We first of all need to go round the room for introductions because Sonia's only her second meeting, so I need to just be clear. And then we need to check quoracy because obviously there are some voting members and there are non-voting members. So I'm Councillor Bob Slay. I hold the position of Deputy Mayor with portfolio for finance.
I'm Ed Cox. I'm Executive Director for Strategy, Economy and Net Zero.
I am Katie Trout, Director of Policy and Partnerships at West Midlands Growth Company.
Mike Wright, Chair of the West Midlands Innovation Board.
Jonathan Skinner, Head of Economic Policy at the Combined Authority.
Andrew Mayer from the Midlands Aerospace Alliance.
Paul Edwards, Head of Economic Development at the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Stephen Hill is Innovation Policy Manager at the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Joe Bacchanay, Senior Policy Officer at West Midlands Combined Authority.
Dana Aldridge, Head of Insight, Combined Authority.
Claire Hatton, Director of Employment Skills, Health and Communities at the Combined Authority.
Councillor Paul Dudley, Deputy Leader of Dudley Council and portfolio holder for Communities and Economic Delivery.
I am Colin Crane. I'm representing the West Midlands Chamber of Commerce.
David Gordon, Head of Employee Services, West Midlands Combined Authority.
Councillor Adrian Andrew, Deputy Leader, Walsall Council.
Kieran Stockley, Head of Legal Services.
Tanya Patel, Government Services Officer. Chair can confirm this meeting is in quorum.
Thank you. Just for the benefit of those people who are on the screen, I see Councillor Courts. I can't also see all the names, but okay. In essence, the meeting has just been declared in quorum. I now take advice as to how we proceed. Councillor advice, please. Yeah.
All of the recommendations.
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm advised there are only 2 voting members actually in the room, but with your indulgence, all the reports in essence are only for noting. There are no decisions being taken today. So I'm advised that we could actually proceed with the meeting on the basis that we would take comments quite clearly in relation to those reports, but we are not in a position to make any formal decisions, and there are actually no formal decisions in the papers. So unless anyone has any serious objections, as we all assemble, I propose we proceed on that basis. Are people content to do that, particularly the 2 councillors who are in the room? Paul and Adrian?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Councillor Courts on screen, any issues? No, you okay with that? Okay, that's fine. Great.
Thumbs up was what I said.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you also have Councillor Warhurst from Redditch on the screen as well. Thank you.
And you're content with that, us to proceed on that basis, yeah?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Okay, we will therefore take apologies for absence if any have been notified, Sonia.
Mr. Chair, apologies for absence have been noted by Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Johnson, Councillor George Dickens and Andy Street. And Sarah Woodron.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. If any members remind of the need to declare any disclosable security interests that they have in an item being discussed during the course of the meeting, in addition to receipt of any gift or hospitality, should be declared where the value of it was thought to have exceeded £25 or £40 hospitality. And wouldn't that be nice? Okay. We therefore move to the first item on the agenda, which is in essence the minutes of the 16th of November 2023, which have previously been circulated. I'm taking those as a true record. There are a number of items which were in previous minutes which should be referred to at this point. Tackling youth unemployment, a report actually is in the papers with us today. Towards a sustainable economy is logged within the forward plan. West Midlands International Strategy Green Paper is at the March the 6th EGB meeting, and the Major Events Fund, MEAG, is unspent. That's the only note I have. Is there any further information on that?
That's exactly as you say. So I think that's all we need to say for now.
Thank you. On that basis, taking those as a true record.
Councillor Courts has got his hand up.
Councillor Courts.
I made a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I made a comment in Combined Authority Board that some comments I made on the subject of youth unemployment I didn't think were reflected here, but I'll deal with that under the substantive item on the report.
Thank you very much. We'll note that accordingly. Thank you. Therefore, we move to our first substantive item on the agenda today, which is the West Midlands Economic Conditions Report. It's Delma with us.
Delma's on the screen.
Delma, you're on the screen, aren't you? There you are. Thank you. Can I ask you to present the report, please? Thank you.
Many thanks, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Just set out some of the key headlines for you this morning. So in terms of the overall West Midlands economic context, since we last met, the year ended slightly more positive. We had a very volatile year, as you'll be aware, but the Purchasing Managers Index for the West Midlands increased slightly up to 51.5 in December. Increase in activity linked to businesses identifying new contract wins and sort of overall better demand conditions. But services inflation is still causing a bit of concern. We've seen that slight uptick in overall inflation up from 3.9% to 4% in December, which may signal that the path ahead is still going to be a bit bumpy. In terms of our Oxford economic model for the region, our baseline forecast suggests that overall the UK economy will grow by 0.4% in 2024, and the West Midlands CA is predicted to grow at 0.2% before strengthening in 2025. Just two particular areas to draw your attention to. Firstly, in terms of the good exports figure, so Q3 was really positive with the year-to-year growth was up 22%, which is very impressive compared to a 2.7 growth for the UK. So we're up now to £34 billion, which is really strong. Our overall exports account for nearly 10% of all UK exports, and we're really illustrating seeing that strength of recovery now in some key sectors like automotive and manufacturing. Our service exports data is a bit lagged, but at only £4 billion exported in 2021. This is an area where there's really potential for considerable growth to sustain the future economy. The focus of the WISE newsletter in January was on digital economies. We got the latest Ofcom Connected Nations annual report, which shows the West Midlands continues to really outperform on connectivity measures, with our gigabit connectivity significantly higher than the national average. But as we'll all know, there's still parts of the region that don't have access to fast and reliable mobile and broadband connectivity. The West Midlands Digital Roadmap identifies new ways to support the region to become that really forward-looking and inclusive of digital economy. I'll leave it there for now. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delma. Any questions within the room at this point? Not indicated. Any points of clarification or questions or comments for anyone on the screen? You could raise your hand as normal. No comment. Okay, on that basis, Delma, thank you very much. The report is for noting. Unless anyone has a contribute, we will note accordingly. All acceptable? That's fine. Thank you. a key issue. The next item on the agenda is tackling rising youth unemployment in the WMCA area. This was a paper I think that the board did ask for a deep dive on, and therefore we'll take it as it is. Who's going to speak to this? Is it Claire?
Yeah.
Claire, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This follows on from the paper we bought last time, which set out the sort of evidence review and the deep dives and considered what works. And last paper had quite a range of recommendations. What we've done is work with officers to produce the costed action plan in the back to narrow down on areas. I think it's fair to say that whilst Dan alluded to claimants being down slightly, youth claimants are up slightly within that as well. So it continues to be a growing issue for us in the region, and very localised. I think as we've been developing our action plan, there are a few key things just to draw out. This is very much something that is led by our local authorities. So we've been working on where we all play our parts in this. So what is led locally, and the recommendations in here around local youth hubs, around digital front doors will be led by local authority officers supported by WMCA, and much of the work with larger employers and work through Business Growth West Midlands will be led by the CA working with local authority employers. So it's very much a combined action plan, and what we need to do now is just to put some of the colour and flavour on how each locality is going to take forward some of those things. So you can see in the back there is an action plan. I'm going to run through very briefly through the key actions that we've agreed. We talked about, and the evidence very strongly shows for young people. We will be launching our pre-apprenticeship programme across the region and from the CA, but obviously it will take place in each locality. We are proposing that we use some of the UK SPF funding to support the bursary for young people undertaking that, which also de-risks for employers, given our aim of wanting to increase the number of SME employers taking on apprentices, because that came out as very key from our evidence and from the discussions, both at this board and with officers. And we are looking at how we commission some new boot camps as well, some specific intensive programmes specifically designed around young people in key sectors and industries, and hoping to pick up some of the green industries as well there. So again, looking at a range of provision we can do there. We have been discussing with local authority officers how we bring together the respective digital platforms into a single front door for the region, and there is commitment to take that work forward. That will be led by the local authority officers group for employment and skills. Good practice in terms of a virtual offer that Solihull have been piloting during COVID times, looking at how we might pick that up and do that regionally. WMCA will take that forward, working with local authorities. We've talked about systematising jobs and careers fairs, lots of great work happening, but again, how do we turbo boost that across the region and do that in a more structured way? And we will lead that, but working closely with local authority officers. Youth hubs, enhancing youth hubs and as the physical place to support young people in the region. Each local authority will look at its plan for doing that, where it needs those youth hubs to be, how it wants to enhance that, and they will come back then and see what they can do and where there are potential cost barriers, and we will take forward discussions both internally and with DWP around that. We know we need to do some more work on SEN, and both Wolverhampton and Birmingham are really keen to support and help lead that work. So we're going to do a bit of a sort of separate deep dive onto SEN issues for young people and youth unemployment. And we do need to start to turn our attention to single settlement in terms of youth unemployment and how we start to develop our investment plan. So we're not in the position we are now, looking at how we can use underspends for bursaries and things. We need to have a more of a considered discussion, and we want to kick off that work now with officers, so we are well placed for that. Second strand of work is really about working with employers. We really need to increase the number of SMEs offering jobs. We have some we have an outreach through Business Growth West Midlands, which will obviously be the way we reach out to a lot of employers, but we're also doing some work from the CA with 5% Club, Youth Friendly Network, Hatch, Movement to Work, and a number of the organisations that do that, and how we can bring all of that to bear to generate a shift in the number of places we've got for apprenticeships and young people moving into employment across the region. And then finally, there are some things that we will continue to push with central government around change, and some of the things we've talked about around, particularly around English and maths for young people, around our work with JCP, but that will be ongoing work that's in any way. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the key areas. Hopefully it gives you a flavour of what we're focusing in on and where we think we can have some impact. As noted in the paper and the previous paper, there is a considerable amount of work in this area that happens locally already. This is designed to build on top of that and to focus in on a few key areas. It is not the total solution to youth unemployment. It is how we are collectively coming together to amplify and give some focus and drive to some key areas.
Thank you. In light of the fact that we're in court, we can't approve the recommended actions in the action plan, but I do propose that that is changed to receive comments to the recommendations in the action plan, and then officers can pick those up accordingly from today's meeting. So I'll take comments. Please indicate if you wish to speak to the report. Councillor Courts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think it was me raised this at a previous combined authority board, that this subject was so important that we really needed special focus on. I know we all made comments at that time, heavily supportive of it. I think this is, I welcome what's been done here. I think we've looked at it comprehensively. I think we've looked at it bringing everybody together. And I think it's a great start to planning the work that can be done. I think my focus is going to be one on how we're going to measure the results of what we do. We know we have statistics that come out, although they're often not that much up to date. So I think we may need supplementary means of measuring the work that is being done. And I'm talking here about the work of the combined authority as much as the work of individual local authorities. I mean, during the the introduction, there was heavy reference made to what the local authorities are doing, and indeed we all know well, and certainly from a Solihull point of view, we're determined we will do everything we can to support this and help this, the workers at CA, where a value is being added to what is being done at a local level. I mean, just an example of this, there's a reference to in the action plan to a consistent and uniform collaboration across the CA area. But you know, the reality is local areas have different needs and different contexts, and the responses need to be tailored accordingly, and that is really important. I mean, in particular, the reference is for us is to the North Solihull and East Birmingham, through to Birmingham, through to the Curzon, the particular areas of high unemployment that we have. And what we know is that selective and targeted action can work. I mean, we worked, I got some stats that I'm looking at here. We work with 260 young unemployed people aged 16 to 29. Now, 107 of those moved into employment and 71 moved into educational training. So that's specific results from the work that we did locally in Solihull. We have run 2 apprenticeship shows, one in the centre, but most importantly, one in North Solihull. And quite frankly, you know, they were heaving with young people, and indeed Warwickshire as well. So we know those can be successful, and it's the sort of thing that we think can be done. It's sponsored by businesses who are there likewise in droves, not just companies, but you've got the health service, you've got local authority, and it's of great joy, frankly, to see queues of people, queuing up to wanting to be nurses and things like that, as well as high-tech companies. So, on the subject of engagement, now there is a topic which I think the combined authority has an extremely important role. I mean, we tend to look at compartmentalize some of these subjects, and this is one, and it's inevitable in some ways that we do it this way, but we shouldn't. I mean, I put on the parallel for the environmental subject, where it's not just the job of the environmental team to take action. It transcends the whole of the CA. And likewise, in relation to youth unemployment, this should be something that is so important. It should transcend the work of departments to see how far we can, engagement with employers can reap dividends. I speak with, do what I call one-to-ones with Solihull businesses, small and big. As usually a couple of those a month when it's a free discussion, and I find out how they tick. And you learn more from that, frankly, from all the surveys in the world. And I really encourage it. And I encourage it for the CA with the contacts it has, where we should be extending that remit. Just in conclusion, just my last point is, I know I've made the point at previous meetings with reference to the proposed apprenticeship bursary. I'd like to see evidence to demonstrate, the effectiveness of that investment, because certainly, I've said it, I don't have enough money to divert any of our money into that, and I'm sure others are in the same purpose. We already could do with more money in doing the things we are doing. So, I'm a bit sort of skeptical, or the jury's out on that item. I think that'll do from me now for the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ian. Any other question? Colin, please.
Thanks, Claire. Really good report. Thanks, mate. When our apprenticeship numbers are right down this year, and it's been a real struggle getting them out. The three big issues that the employers are coming up with when we spoke to them about this is one about getting people ready for employment before they're ready for apprenticeship. So I really welcome the pre-apprenticeship work, and also the boot camp work you're doing. It's really helped that. The second issue is around the apprenticeship wage of 16 to 18-year-olds is less than the national minimum wage. So, and when we've spoken to young people, that is a genuine deterrent to go into apprenticeship courses when they can earn a lot more just working in fast food instalments or warehouses. So the bursary is welcome, but it'd be good to do some bit of analysis, understanding if that will make the difference to the gap between that. If we had a way of bridging that gap and getting the minimum apprenticeship wage up to the minimum wage as a programme, I think that'd have a really big impact on getting young people in. And the third one is, I'm not sure if we can resolve that here, is often when there's a whole household who are on benefit system, if a young person goes into an apprenticeship, that apprenticeship wage then brings the household benefits down by that apprenticeship wage, which sometimes has an impact on young people taking it. Now, that probably isn't something you can deal with this money, but it's certainly something as a policy idea for the Combined Authority area that we should look at as well. Thank you.
Any other questions before I pass back to Claire? Councillor Courts raised the issues of the measures that we're going to undertake, and I think we need to understand some of that. And obviously, Corin's raised other points, which I'm sure you'll want to respond to. I have one point, if I can, just with regard to the action plan. I have a little bit of a bee in my bonnet about the fact that one of the obstacles or barriers to employment is often transport. I have personal data, in fact, and it's rather difficult to comprehend how some of our most deprived areas are not taking up the opportunities for some of the jobs that we provide, certainly with some of our larger employers. And I would like to understand at some point in time, is the issue of transport and accessibility an obstacle to people taking some of those jobs? It is quite stark in some of our postcode areas where, even though jobs are around, people don't seem to be taking them. So I just put that in as my own comment. But do you want to pick up the points that were raised, Claire, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on your point, the last, we have looked at that in pockets. The airport is one of the areas we have looked at, and we've looked at that particularly for residents from East Birmingham. And yes, transport is an issue when you look at that. So it will be in pockets, it won't be in other areas, but you're absolutely right, and we will continue to do that with particular employment, where there's good employment and good jobs and a volume of them that people can go to. We'll undertake to look at that at those sites across the region, like we've done for the airport. To Councillor Courts' points, thank you for those. Yes, we'll look at supplementary indicators. We do have the evidence around bursary and the impact it can have. So we will bring that, we'll circulate that, and we can share that with people. I think it is something important we test. Was totally recognised that Foyt Council reports are saying there isn't enough money, and I know local authorities can't fund from their allocations. That's partly why we were using some of the regional money for that. But there is broad support for it from officers, but an inability to be able to afford it at the moment. So it is something that is generally supported across local officers and employment and skills. And yeah, on the pre-apprenticeships and boot camps, thank you, Corinne. You're right about national apprenticeship wage. I suppose one of the things we have to look at how we do is you don't have to pay the minimum wage. You know, employers can choose to pay the living wage. They don't have to pay the apprenticeship minimum. So it is as much about employer practice as it is about national policy. Agree, Corinne, we need to continue those discussions around national policy and rules on that. But there is something about good employers can choose to pay the living wage as well. So, but yeah, thank you for your comments. We'll take those and we'll continue to work with officers and bring this back at a future meeting. That's acceptable.
That was another question really, is what's the plan to bring this back? In essence, it's work in progress, and you'll keep the EGB upgrade up to speed with what the developments are.
Yeah.
Before we close the item, any further points? Ian, do you want to come back on anything? You're on mute.
The answer is yes. Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I understand there will be reason for the bursaries, and there is, you know, no doubt, you know, they will achieve something. What I'm saying is, relatively, we haven't got the money. Okay, you acknowledge that, but I think it's a really important thing that local efforts that are being made aren't hampered by, you know, a reduction of funding being used for new initiatives. In other words, we support all this, but we have a lot going on, and we want to keep that going, you know, successfully ourselves. I think the request I made at a previous meeting was, I mean, it's fine keep having reports back, but, you know, I actually would like to see what is the action being taken, and I think that's what I'm keen to see. And I did ask for an early meeting. I was actually referring to this one when I could see I'm not talking about reports and process. I'm talking about where can we see results that are being delivered on the ground. That's what we want.
Thank you. We'll note that. I think Ed wants to come in.
Just specifically on the last point that Councillor Courts makes, I mean, there is now an action plan, and that is what we will bring back with, where we will set out that these actions are actually now happening when we bring this report back. But there wasn't an action plan before, and now there is an action plan. That's action plan is on top of the action that is already taking place in local authority areas. The second point I just want to be crystal clear about, because I know that other local authorities, some of whom are not present today, have flagged this, is that there was at an earlier stage an intention that local authorities would match fund the work around bursaries. And can we just be 100% sure we are not expecting local authorities to match fund in the way in which was originally considered, just to really put that one to bed?
Yes, thank you, Ed. Yeah, absolutely. You know, based on feedback, things council reports have said, but other local authorities have said, recognise there isn't any ability for anyone to match funds. So there is no requirement for any match funding. Somebody wants to use money for that, it's totally up to them, but there is no requirement for that.
Thank you, Claire. That clarifies the point. Corinne, do you want to come back on anything? Okay, you consent, that's fine. Any other questions or comments? As I've said, we are simply noting the comments made to the report, and we'll take those items away accordingly. We'll therefore move on to our next item, which is Business Growth West Midlands, service update and future funding. I think, Paul, this is down to you, isn't it?
Thank you. I won't belabor points in the paper, but I'll headline four things for Growth Board members. First off is to point out that service performance is really very strong, and for that I particularly thank all 7 local authorities for all the excellent work they're doing. There's been a lot of work by all partners as we reflect, as we've changed the model of how we support businesses over the last year, and the fact that the numbers look so well is almost entirely down to our local authority colleagues and their changing practices and ways of working. So thank them particularly for that. To give Economic Growth Board a sense of the number of businesses being supported, it's currently trending at about twice the levels that were supported under LEP growth hubs. And that is no slight intended or implied on the LEP growth hubs. CA Board committed quite a lot more resource to this than LEP growth hubs have, so I'd be surprised if it wasn't at least twice. But to give a sense, and that's particularly building on the expertise of the growth hubs in Birmingham, Solihull and Coventry, the vast majority of staff who are still working on supporting businesses, so really retain that expertise through, even though they're employed by different organisations. Appendix 1 talks to the regional programmes. Economic Growth Board will recall the hub and spoke model that we're following with account managers based in localities is reliant on having programmes at a regional level. So a lot of those programmes are now in delivery. So I won't particularly call out examples, but if any Economic Growth Board members would like to target any of those numbers are in the appendix. I'm happy to speak to all of them. Finally, two items for guidance from Economic Growth Board. As Claire has indicated, we're forecasting an underspend in the year for regional allocation of UKSPF business support, and that's primarily around strategic relationship management. And we're proposing, working with Claire, that £500,000 of that underspend is put towards the first refund. So to make that really explicit, that's that move that we're proposing. So happy to take guidance and thoughts on that. And then we're also currently forecasting an underspend for 24-25 against regional programmes. And that's primarily because we've been able to operate the core hub much more efficiently than we originally intended when this paperwork went to CA Board 18 months ago. And also having worked with the growth company and other colleagues around strategic relationship management, we think the budget for that next year won't hit it at all. So we're currently planning, and again, it's with guidance from EGB, to focus that underspend of around 1.9 million on three things. One, there is not currently any kind of dedicated export support programme in the West Midlands. So we've been working closely with West Midlands Growth Company and DBT to work out how we fill that gap. We feel there's about 2 or 3% of the business base in the West Midlands who either have dipped their toe into export and haven't grown it, or are capable of exporting and haven't. There is no dedicated support for those businesses or publicly funded support from the chambers. I know everybody from this support. The other is an extension of the supply chain transition programme, which has been here before and is currently at assessment. So we've allocated 1 million of Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund towards that. And then the third item is community-led business support. So looking for a steer on Economic Growth Board about whether they're the right things to spend on, and if not, what you'd like us to spend on instead. But happy to take questions.
Thank you. Responses or questions? Corey, please.
Thanks, Paul. And the data really looks really impressive, mate. So well done with that. From a very quick start, you've made a big impact on it. I just had three areas really from looking at the report that would be good to sort of look at in more detail, I guess, at some stage. The first one is the diagnostic work is probably the most important work you do as a business support agency, and it'd be really good to actually analyse the diagnostic data in a bit more more deep fashion, just to understand what the businesses are actually genuinely asking for, what supports they're asking for, what gaps they've got in the commercial model at the moment, where their final destination is often, because you'll have short-term support programs sometimes, and we don't want people dropping off at the other end. And often when you look at that data, there might be commercial responses to what they're asking for rather than just using public funding. And I'm sure that we can help you look at that. The second one is I do think that we need to make, and this is not aimed at you, this is aimed at us as well, we need to drive better collaboration between the business support and the agencies across the West Midlands. We're not promoting you as much as we should do as a chamber, and I think we can do more around that, particularly with the cross referrals between when we've got people coming to the end of short-term funding programmes, when the agencies will wrap the support around that. Clearly chambers do that, but there's a lot of other very good agencies as well that be doing the same work. And we've got a massive profile locally, so we've got some marketing money. Feel free to spend that with us as well, Paul. We'll always take you up on that. And the final part is the gaps in the market. There is some underspend. So I love the link between the business support and the apprenticeship scheme. That's absolutely fantastic. They're not two different conversations, are they? When you're talking about business growth, skills comes under that. So really welcome that. Make the funding as flexible as you can. The job fairs are ace, and actually some small pots of money to pump prime local job fairs or big regional job fairs goes an awful long way. The higher profile you make them, the more businesses you'll get on the table. So you can get a lot if you've got some flexible money to do that. We've got a waiting list at a local level. We do some brilliant work with Coventry City Council and Warwickshire Council as well. But we've got a waiting list at the moment. We've spent all of our allocation this year for UKSBF on capital grants for IT equipment, where we get 50% match in the business and 50%. We've got a waiting list for that. We can't start until 24-25. We've also got a big long waiting list for our accelerated growth programme, which again is UKSBF funded for this year. And what that does, it looks at small businesses who've been established a while and helping them grow quicker. And we've got, honestly, we can't spend that quick enough for the business to line up to do that one. It'd be great to see that pump primed. There's some issues around the tourism and hospitality sector who are looking at net zero as a way to work new trade, particularly hotels and hospitality. If there's a way of using the money for that, a lot of the hotels are really seeing the green tourist at the moment as a big way of increasing funding. And we haven't got support programs to help that. I could go on all day about the support programs. Digital support for smaller businesses is absolutely critical. We're talking a lot about how they start to use AI for their marketing, for their recruitment, some support programs around that. And my final one is around international trade. And I will send you this list, mate. We've got so many businesses at the moment that are tiptoeing towards selling more online and more through the databases. There are some really good DIT programs that support that, but actually some international trade support for smaller one-man bands and bigger to actually get them trading overseas online would be really welcome. And you can do a lot with a little money for that. That's been done, mate.
Thank you. Before you respond, I'll take Councillor Courts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, so often around this table we're asking for things to be done, and I think this is a case where things were done, and there's a great degree of success out of a lot that's being done. Certainly, we saw in Solihull we had a launch in November, and the room was packed. I think we had over 200 organisations attend, and so the awareness is certainly growing of this. I'm still getting emails in relation to November, actually. So I welcome and thank the support that the team at the CA has provided, working with our own officers. Can I just ask a question relating to the previous item? Youth unemployment, is that well embedded into this whole programme? Because it needs to be. Corinne's just made quite a number of important points on digital support. I remember through our LEP in the COVID times when we were looking at Pivot and Prosper, how the take-up from various companies, I mean, a lot of business support type companies, professional services, but retailers in particular were not necessarily, we weren't getting as many expressions of interest as we would like. And quite honestly, retailers, vital for all our various centres across the region. They do often, you know, they're one-man bands in some cases. The more we can support them go online or use that as an addition to their marketing, the better. So I absolutely support what Corinne has said. Could do with some further details on the export support programme. We've actually launched a similar offer at Birmingham Solihull, so we want to make sure there is no duplication on that. And finally, in my point, we must be mindful of funding needs post March. That's almost a year's time now, and obviously we would support our regional efforts to make sure this is recognised in the single settlement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to respond? And Councillor Courts, a couple of questions there.
Yeah, of course. So I think Corinne spent 1.9 million about 10 times over. So thank you. So I think all really helpful points. Thank you, Corinne. I think probably two things to tease out specifically on that. Thank you for your offers of help, and yes, definitely, we all collectively need to get better at cross-referring, and that's certainly near top of my to-do list. I think we'd all acknowledge that. Specifically on the green issues, we're clearly not promoting this well enough, but the Business Energy Advice Service is meant to hit some of that point. So I'll make sure that we send you over the details of that, because that funding is targeted actually, particularly hospitality businesses, as much as anything else. I think Councillor Courts had two specific questions on the bursary fund. Excuse me. On the bursary fund. So obviously we're working very closely with Claire and her team on that, and the delivery mechanism we're looking at for that is through Business Growth West Midlands service. So that is joined together in that sense of the word, and as Colin indicates, it is closely linked to business performance as much as it is to youth and employment issues. So that's really important. And then specifically on the export support programme, there is a proposed export support programme at the court. We have had conversation with your officers. As I understand it, the offer of Birmingham Solihull was primarily a financial offer, and the proposed programme here would be a non-financial offer. So actually the two programmes are almost perfectly complementary in the sense that firms that go through the programme in Birmingham Solihull could potentially get some money to go on trade missions, and equally companies in Birmingham Solihull that get some money to go on trade missions would be excellent companies to come into the wider programme.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to come back?
No, it's okay.
Thank you. Corinne, anything to add? And you're going to send your list to Paul.
Let's do it now, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, the item is for noting. I'll rely on the clock to. Thank you. We now move on to West Midlands Innovation Board 6-month report, and Mike's here with us today. So, Mike, I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The paper, I won't go through the paper in all the detail, but essentially 4 or 5 key points. One is that we shared with you some innovation board priorities for 2023, which were reviewed at the Innovation Board in December. And essentially the main priorities, we decided to continue with those, but obviously with some changes to reflect where we've got to in end of 23, looking forward over the next 2 or 3 years. And if you remember, the focus of the activity was to support the plan for growth, but also open up new innovation in additional clusters to our established DNA in automotive and aerospace. So in clean tech, in meditech, and very quickly emerging the creative tech sectors. So that's the kind of approach we're taking. So to increase the bandwidth of our innovation capability, not to decline our efforts on automotive and aerospace, because as we'll hear from Andrew later, they're very significant activities, but to expand our bandwidth of capability. The first item, the priority is, so I'll just draw out some key points on each of the 5, if I may. The Innovation Accelerator is now well over a year old. We have just over a year to deliver. It's moving at pace, and you've seen the metrics. To be candid, we've had 1 or 2 challenges, but when you're doing a pilot, that's actually good news because you learn from it. But by and large, we had a deep dive review earlier this month with each of them, and by and large, they're on track. And I have to acknowledge that the relationship with Innovate UK, who clearly are providing the funding, is very positive, challenging but positive, and I'll come on to that relationship a bit more in the future. So the programme is going well, but we shouldn't be complacent, and we have to deliver, as I say, get them up and running by May 25. The second priority is to seize opportunities to develop the local innovation ecosystems, a topic that this board has fed back on and is one that's right at the heart of our thinking. There are a number of activities listed here that demonstrate that I think we're getting better at it. Still more work to do, but again, you'll note that there are a number of work streams going on with Innovate UK who have established a plan for growth with us, which was launched last July back in at Wolverhampton. And we haven't forgotten those near miss innovation accelerator projects. We're still trying to find funding for them because most of them are still valid. And if we could get some additional money over and above the 33 million, we'll certainly get them up on their legs. There are some deep dive discussions which indicate what we're going to spend more time looking at in more detail. One is working with the growth company to demonstrate in our export communications, our FDI activities, that the innovation ecosystem in the region is very strong. And we've talked about this before about being more confident in our narrative and communicating that. And very shortly we'll have a joint program that we'll be launching with the growth company. There's some narrative out there, but we'll do more on that. A key aspect is investor finance, not unique to this region, and it's everything from the macro that tech startups tend to go to the US for money, right down to how do we leverage initiatives like MindForge with the universities and get more private equity and venture capital and private money into the region. And we've spoken with the officials, but with a number of interested parties, and we need to do a better job on that. It won't be easy because people tend to fly over the West Midlands regrettably from London, but that is a battle that we need to take on. And of course, we've been involved in making sure that the investment zone reflects the innovation strategies that we have, which has been very well received. I've talked about priority 3, the reputation for innovation nationally and globally. I won't repeat that. Ensure that the region is at the vanguard of government policy. Of course, in the devolution deal, innovation wasn't part of the devolved activity, and we're having discussions with the Science Minister, with DCIT and other government agencies to try and get a more significant wad of money to come into the region to operate in the same way as the pilot, the Innovation Accelerator Pilot, because frankly, 33 million in the overall scheme of things is not a lot of money. And we've set ourselves a target of 100 million. And we'll see how we get on with that. Obviously, the current political climate is, perhaps I can comment, nobody else can, but makes these discussions a little more challenging than maybe in a more stable situation. And then build partnerships with the innovation clusters is the 5th priority. And just to signal that whilst we are focused absolutely on the West Midlands region, it does make sense that we have partnership agreements with adjacencies, particularly some of the East Midlands universities and some of the activities going on there, Midlands University Council. And going back to Innovation Accelerator, it is interesting that already, if you remember, there are only 3 regions in the UK that had this pilot. We are starting to attract business interest from outside the region to be part of those pilot programs. So it's interesting that the word is out there, and we'll have some interesting decisions to make on how we manage that investment. So that is a quick run through in terms of our activities. I'd like to thank the officials for their support in everything that we're doing on the Innovation Board. And just for a governance point of view, just to signal that we are doing a kind of review in terms of skills on the Innovation Board looking forward against this plan to see whether we need to sort of have a different profile of representation. From a business perspective, the universities will still be there.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mike, for the leadership you're showing on this. Some tremendous work here is being done. So on behalf of the board, I think we should recognise your contribution to that. And thanks very much for what you've done.
That's very kind of you. It is a team effort.
But it does require leadership, Mike. So take it as it springs.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take any questions. Councillor Courts, please. Can you put your mic up, please, Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just raise a query about the reference on page 48 to however much more ambition around the scale of regional investment funds is needed? I have massive ambition about this. I know, as the Deputy Mayor will say, so has Mayor Andy Street. And, you know, I'm just wondering where this ambition needs to be. We've been pushing the West Midlands, we've been pushing individual projects, and certainly in Solihull's case we have the whole project around HS2 and Arden Cross, and indeed health innovation zones that we are promoting. So I'm just, you know, really just wondering about that. I don't like to see that, because I want to know who needs to do more to demonstrate that ambition.
Mike?
I think there are two aspects to this. One is if you start at the going back to the levelling up paper that was was launched a couple of years ago, there was a commitment in that paper that there would be more of a place-based focus to the allocation of research funds through the universities and other mechanisms. And frankly, that's what's driving our ambition. There are no clear metrics on what that means, other than more money will be place-based against the overall UK RI budget. And it's against that kind of context that we're saying, okay, well, what does that really mean for the West Midlands, over and above all the other activities that flow into the regions directly through the universities? And I think the ambition is not only financial, it's also, can we have more say in where those research monies go, so that it reflects our plan for growth and the clusters that we're trying to develop in the region. We're very involved. The Mayor support is you know, fantastic in terms of engaging with national government to make our point. But it is a journey. We haven't had any conclusion yet. We're not backing off, but we set an arbitrary target of 100 million to start, and we'll see where it gets us. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but it is, you know, there is within UKRI, the only agency that really is adopting a devolved agenda at the moment is Innovate UK, and we are benefiting from that relationship. The other agencies within UKRI, I won't say are reluctant, but we haven't got the same degree of devolved engagement that we have with Innovate UK.
Thank you. Ian, you want to come back?
Well, yes, please. I mean, I understand the problem. What I'm trying to do is sort of join up the various parts here. I mean, we in the West Midlands, we have an investment zone, massively important. We have the best connected place in probably in Europe, let alone England, in terms of the area around where will be the HS2 station, and whatever the you know, the talk about HS2, there is a massive, you know, really important zone there. So we have, you know, we have all those opportunities. And, you know, my reading always, if when people want to invest, they want location is really important. And we have all those things. So I think the dots can be joined up here, and, you know, the opportunities we have in those zones and in the West Midlands generally can be promoted. And certainly I, for one, as I'm involved with one of them, will be happy to do anything necessary to promote them.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Corin, please.
I'm not just doing this because Ian's spoken, by the way. I've made that point anyway. It was just your point on the investment zoning. It's really good to hear you lined up the innovation strategy alongside that. For a future agenda item, it might be really good for this group to look at the investment zone timetable just in a bit more detail as a major agenda item, just so we can understand the sort of timetable, what the different zones are looking at, the skills issues, the investment issues, because a joint approach to how we make that success will be really important. And I think that'd be a good agenda item for us.
Well, we'll note that accordingly. Thank you. Any further points to raise? The report is for noting, and the clerk has taken the appropriate comments as they've been made. Thank you. We're therefore now going to move on to a number of updates. West Midlands Plan for Growth Aerospace is the first one today, Andrew, passing over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to the meeting. Just to start by saying from the Midlands Aerospace Alliance, we're a cluster organisation, business-led, companies like Rolls-Royce in the West Midlands, Collins Aerospace in Wolverhampton, Meggitt over in Rugby. These are our key companies, lots of small supply chain companies. But as a cluster organisation, we work closely with public sector and stakeholder bodies. We have had a very close relationship with the combined authority since it was set up, a lot of support from the mayor. And particularly, I'm looking down this side of the table, I think accidentally. We sat here, a lot of colleagues we work with very closely. So I'm very pleased to be here today. Joe's going to run some slides. These will parallel the report that you've got in your pack, which is written from a policy perspective, and I'll dip into that as I'm going along through these slides. But we thought it would be useful just to give the board a little bit of background on the aerospace cluster from an economic development viewpoint, from a regional viewpoint, and then connect that into the policy environment. So next slide, please, Joe. And again, so aerospace is an industry not always well understood. What we do in the Midlands is make parts and components of civil aircraft, the passenger aircraft we fly on our holidays, trade, and that industry is connected to defence aerospace industry. We make parts of Eurofighter Typhoons, the kind of aircraft that have been flying over the Red Sea, for example, recently, and indeed in Wolverhampton make part of the weapons systems that those aircraft use. But that's not really our main focus in the Midlands, it's civil. We connected to a space cluster and we're doing some work again with the combined authority through the Plan for Growth supported by the UK Space Agency to develop that. It's something that you might want to come back to at a future meeting, I think. But we're a little bit distinct from the aviation industry, the airport and the airlines, not as connected up as the rail industry, where the infrastructure and the rail companies are more closely connected. It's a long-term growth industry, and I'll come back to how that functions and what that means for the region in a minute, but just a bit of definition to start us off, Joe. An industry structured into supply chains. So we have, as I'll say in a minute, a number of OEMs in aerospace, tier ones in the Midlands, and we have a big representation of the smaller supply chain companies, which many of the members of the board will know from their own local areas, smaller manufacturers and a lot of our industrial estates, very high-tech companies, sometimes not part of the ecosystem we work with, and part of our job is to join that up, and a very deep supply chain here in the West Midlands in particular, parallel to what we have in automotive, probably still more structured in automotive where there's been more restructuring perhaps. These are some of those brands that I talked about. You can see from some of the pictures here. It's a high investment industry when there is a long-term growth can be forecast as it was earlier in the century. Companies will reinvest in new facilities like the Meggitt facility at Anstey Park, like the Moog facility on I-54, like the new Rolls-Royce facility, relatively new near the airport. And that's the same story for a lot of our smaller companies, which will invest when the work is there and they can forecast the revenue coming in, and therefore the same issues over availability of industrial sites that many other sectors and clusters will do. But it's not a very high inward investment industry. It's very difficult to move work in aerospace backwards and forwards. It's very expensive. And so investment needs to be about growing what we've got here, making sure that when the companies do need new sites, they can find them in the local area and keep their employees, their skilled employees, still working, which is always a massive criterion when it comes to reorganizing. Next. These are the aircraft that are, if you're flying on them, that you need to be looking out for, particularly the Boeing 787, the Dreamliner, the A350. Got a lot of the supply chain for these aircraft is in the Midlands. A lot of that through Rolls-Royce, through Derby and through Birmingham into the supply chain, but also, for example, Moog and Wolverhampton designing the systems that make the flaps move on the aircraft for the 787. That's a classic piece of Midlands work. Moving on to how that relates back into the Midlands. Here's a typical cluster diagram. If you can't read it, certainly the slides will be available. On the right-hand side is the demand driver, really, the revenue coming into the industry. It's a heavily traded sector. 98% of the revenue generated by aerospace in the UK comes from export, and that then flows into the region in ways we'll discuss in a minute. And the Midlands in particular has got this deep supply chain through to the metals manufacturing. And connected to other sectors too. A lot of our companies supply into the mobility and green industries, motorsport and so on. And then an infrastructure on the bottom here of a lot of the engineering companies, and this is a great advantage for the West Midlands and the Midlands as a whole in aerospace. We've got these routes into the R&D assets and the engineering services companies, the manufacturers of tooling and equipment and so on and so forth. We've been doing some research, as is mentioned in the paper, on the size of the sector. Obviously, the plan for growth, a fantastic strategy document, exactly the right approach from our viewpoint, from a cluster development perspective. We're making sure that the numbers on that fit what we know is the case in the region. If you use the government statistics, it doesn't always give you a good view. And that's illustrated really here from left to right. The official statistics are on the left. The companies we know participating are on the right. And we're doing some work with the Midlands Engine, with Delman and her team, to develop that will then dig into the West Midlands, so that we've got a much better understanding of the companies involved and the contribution to the region. This is the sort of economic theory, which I won't go through in great detail, but this is really about it. This is a long-term high-tech industry, safety critical, very highly regulated industry, very geographically immobile, which is a great advantage in terms of keeping what you've got through various economic downturns. Very difficult to die in the aerospace industry. It's not like the car industry that if you miss out on one or two new products, you're in difficulty. We've got companies making parts of engines that were designed in the 1950s, and they're still required in industry. If we look at the economic impact of that, the work we're doing with the Midlands Engine at the moment, that will flow through into the Combined Authority, the spend that comes through this fairly high wage industry flows into the specialist service companies and then out into the generic supply chain and into induced employment through employee spend. When we work all that out using standard economic models, we've got about 100,000 jobs, 2% of the jobs in the region as a whole. I should say that our estimate for the West Midlands is about 40% of that, the Combined Authority area. So very substantial part of the Midlands economy. Finally, some of the focusing on one set of issues that we've got. This is a very important industry from a sustainability perspective, and it's an industry that, to be frank, is struggling with these issues like other mobility sectors, like the heavy goods industry. It's going to be one of the most difficult to decarbonise sectors, particularly long distance flying. We can help contribute to that by supporting our companies, in particular to invest in new greener technologies. And I should say this is an industry where nearly all of the innovation takes place in industry. When it takes place to some degree within universities, it's because the companies have put it there to get public sector subsidies. So Rolls-Royce has a system of university technology centres. Research that it used to do internally is now at universities. So it isn't really one of those sectors where the economic development comes from university spin-outs, for example. And we can do a lot of work on helping our companies to decarbonise and to invest in new technology for new greener aircraft, hydrogen, more electric, and so on. We have a new project just announced on Monday by the Energy Security and Net Zero Department nationally, which also has a little bit like Innovate UK, a desire to work with regional clusters, place-based approach on the decarbonisation of the sector. So we're going to be doing some work to help smaller companies to decarbonise their manufacturing and supply chain operations. Most of the issue in aerospace, frankly, is when we fly. That's when we're burning the fuel, but a good part of the what we can influence is what we do within our own factories and our own supply chains. We've done some projects in the past that can contribute here, going back a little while now, because this is the past. When we had ERDF funding, we ran a big program with the University of Nottingham. University of Nottingham is the sort of the WMG of the aerospace industry. As WMG is to the car industry, Nottingham is to the aerospace industry in the country and in the Midlands. So we work very closely with them, supporting lots of SMEs to do new product development and invest in manufacturing technologies. And in fact, going back to the first West Midlands Innovation Programme, we ran a pilot for a cross-sector programme to help companies to develop technologies out of one sector into another. A couple of examples here on new fuels and on automotive manufacturing. This is the kind of project that we submitted obviously into the Innovation Accelerator, and this is perhaps one of the ones that Mike was talking about earlier that could potentially be taken forward. Finally, some of the challenges that we've got really simply focused on the innovation agenda here, although the export and other agendas are relevant to us too, of course. We really have struggles getting the national organisations to support our supply chain companies. And that's true for Innovate UK. It's especially true for the Aerospace Technology Institute, which siphons money out of UKRI into aerospace. Supports Rolls-Royce and the other big companies, which of course is essential too. So the big development projects like new engines are extremely expensive, but doesn't really support the smaller supply chain companies. So the agenda that you've heard talked about, I'm sure in these meetings that I've talked about with colleagues on this side of the table, we share entirely. It's exactly the same picture that we have. And it means that we either need to work with the national organisations, Stephen and Paul and I have been doing, talking to the Aerospace Technology Institute to try to persuade them to loosen the purse strings for the smaller companies, or it means that we need to talk about devolving funding so that we can control that ourselves in our region and support companies in the way that we know better how to do that. One statistic to justify what I'm saying, of all the highly qualified aerospace companies that we've got in the Midlands, there are about 300 of them. 94% of them have never had any national R&D funding. Astonishing. And so, and something we can potentially measure and work on improving. I'll stop there, Chair. The paper that you've got refers to a number of projects that we're doing with the Combined Authority that you might want to discuss, but I hope that's a useful background.
Thank you. Ken, I think you indicated that the slides could be circulated. That's fine. That's helpful. Comments or questions in the room or on the screen? I don't see any hands. Ian, are you there? You're coming in.
Thank you, Chairman. You don't expect me to pass on a topic like this, I think. That's an amazing presentation, and thank you very much. It's really informative. A couple of comments on it. You know, this just shows the importance of the aviation sector to the West Midlands, but I think it also shows another thing, which is the importance of the aviation sector in the climate change and decarbonisation agenda. I mean, I was particularly noting on the slide that showed demand growth, which was soaring, and carbon emissions, which was not only static, but going down. That is a really important factor, because so many times do we hear, and I mean, you know, we all know, and certainly I've led it for years on in terms of the need for climate change action, but it doesn't mean, as I'm afraid some say, we shouldn't have airports, we shouldn't have flight. It's quite the opposite. We need to do these things much better, and I think what is being demonstrated here is the ability of this sector and this region to lead on green growth, embracing all the needs of new technology and innovation and decarbonisation all at the same time. So this is great. This is great work, great stuff, and I can't believe that you know, 90% gets no R&D funding. I mean, that is for a sector that's so important, not just for this country, but internationally, because whatever we do in this country, our competitors overseas will be pushing hard, and we need to keep up and get ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. And do you want to comment on those points?
I need to agree with all of that.
Fine, I think agreement. I mean, personally, I'm very proud of the fact that in my ward I have Rolls-Royce Aerospace at Birmingham Business Park, and you know, these are high quality, high value jobs, and we welcome them. I think everybody else in the region would love those organisations to choose their places to bring their companies. But thanks for that. As Councillor Court said, it's really impressive. Does anyone else wish to comment before we take the report as noted? No indications. So thank you, Andrew, for that. Very helpful. Thank you. We therefore move on to our second update item, which is West Midlands Growth Company Q3 performance report against the Global West Midlands Business Plan. Katie, this is for you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So following the approval of the Economic Growth Board of the Growth Company's business plan back in July of last year, we're now reporting on a quarterly basis against progress of that plan. So the report that you have in front of you reflects Q3 activity against each of the 4 strategic objectives that were outlined in the business plan. Under each of those objectives, the report highlights performance against our KPIs that are relevant to that objective, also the headline activity that's underpinned that performance, and then also outlines activity to grow the pipeline or particular investment opportunities or event opportunities we have in that pipeline as well. The report is very much written from a programme-wide perspective, but what we've tried to do is highlight regional impacts and also local ones as well. But there is much more detail in terms of our specific impacts in each of the local authority quarterly reports than I know we've shared with most of your officers now, and then we'll be meeting with many of you over the coming weeks as well. So in terms of performance against the KPIs, I think overall we are showing positive trajectory, so particularly around the inward investment wins. So we've got 52 so far, which is generating 3,600 jobs. Also good performance against business conferences that have landed and sporting events as well. To date, we haven't had a capital investment landing yet, but we are progressing some really strong opportunities across a number of different local authority areas. So hopefully we will get the first mark on that target within the next quarter as well. The report highlights a number of key events that we undertook, or we either led on or were supported in over Q3, which we used to raise the profile of the region and the opportunities that we have here. And in each of those, we very much worked really closely with partners across the public, private and academic sectors. So a few examples of those are Birmingham Tech Week, which we had a Global West Midlands Day here within the city, but then we also took investors out on familiarisation visits across to a number of different local authority areas as well. We attended Medica in Dusseldorf, which is where we were able to highlight the really burgeoning life sciences proposition in the region. Also Expo Real, where we highlighted a number of strategic innovation projects that we have here, very much linking to the work of the Innovation Board. The Global Investment Summit, and then also we had a very successful travel trade sales mission to New Delhi, which was led by Visit Britain. The report also talks about a number of key programmes as well, where we've worked really closely again with all of our local authority partners and wider partners as well. So these include the Major Events Fund, which you'll remember you agreed the projects to get supported through that fund at your last meeting. The expansion of the Global Growth Programme across the region. Work around strategic relationship management and taking that forward. Work on getting a much more consistent kind of campaigning approach around securing future public sector relocations. And then the planning that we've been doing around UK Reef and Sport Accord, which are obviously 2 really pivotal events for us coming up in the next few months. We also talked quite a bit in the report around work around the visitor economy, and I think one of the ones I'll pick out on there is the work around the visitor pass. So this we should have operational from the spring, and this is an opportunity really to promote people coming and spending more time in the region and visiting more of our attractions here. And then I'll just finally leave on the last point around the positive discussions that we're still having with Visit Britain, Visit England and DCMS around becoming a second destination development pilot partnership as well. So those are ongoing, but hopefully we'll be able to bring those to a conclusion soon, and that will be an element of the deeper devolution deal that we will be able to action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Very comprehensive. Any comments or questions for Kate? None indicated. None on the screen indicated. The report, therefore, is for noting. Thank you. We now move on to our third update, single settlement and local government growth pillar. I think, Ed, you were doing this, aren't you?
Jonathan was good.
Jonathan, or I've got Ed's name again, but
Sorry,
Jonathan's doing, is it? There we go.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to be quite sure between Ed and I, we can kind of answer any questions. So, switch the microphone on first. So yeah, the purpose of this paper really is to keep the Economic Growth Board members appraised of the development, particularly of the single strategy element of the evolution deal that we struck. In pursuing this, that at the autumn statement, the memorandum of understanding was agreed with government about how that will be developed. And one of the particular pillars around local growth and place is of particular relevance for this board. And so the purpose of the paper is to be able to explain the kind of initial groundwork that is going on at the moment with our partners, both within the region and with government, to be able to flesh out the kind of scope of that work. Also important to note that that relates to a piece of work that we're doing about the development of place-based strategies as well. So ensuring that the kind of region-wide functional work that will come to life through the pillars also speaks to those local priorities. And through this meeting, we've had kind of several good examples, including on youth and employment and some of the Business Growth West Midlands activity. So yeah, this really prepares members for future work as that evolves later in the year. I know that in particular many of our local authority members kind of will have heard this through some of the political meetings that have happened, but particularly for those business members, that's just a kind of preparatory briefing, I suppose, following the MOU that was agreed at the autumn statement and with a bit of an eye to what comes later this year. Happy to.
Thank you, Jonathan. Take any questions or comments for Jonathan? Not indicated on the screen. That's an update, just for noting. Thank you. The final item is the Economic Growth Board Work Programme, which is page 83 to 84. It's for noting, but does anyone wish to comment? I think we've taken the broad points that have been raised earlier as what people would expect maybe in the programme, so we'll take those forward, although we can't take a decision on those at this point in time. Any comments or questions? None indicated, that's fine. I think that's it. The date of the next meeting is 6th of March 2024 at 2 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance, and I will take up the issue of piracy outside the meeting. Thank you.